Have you ever walked out of a business meeting feeling like you were arguing but couldn't pinpoint exactly why? Like you're having the same disagreement over and over but everyone's talking past each other? Yeah, me too. I facilitated quite a few of those meetings. I had all the tools, conflict resolution techniques, communication frameworks, you name it. But sometimes nothing worked. Smart people, good intentions, and we'd still end up in the same circular arguments week after week. Then something weird happened. It probably started with The Good Place. Amazing show, by the way. Then Michael Schur's book, How to Be Perfect, got me hooked, and I fell down a philosophy rabbit hole. Now look, I'm no philosopher. I'm just someone who reads the stuff for fun. Yeah, I know, right? But I started noticing something fascinating. Those impossible debates in my meetings, they sounded exactly like the arguments philosophers have been having for centuries. That product manager insisting we need to maximize user engagement, that's utilitarian ethics. The engineer saying we promised that feature, we have to deliver it, that sounds a lot like an argument Kant would make. They weren't having a business disagreement, they were having a philosophical debate without knowing it. Here's what I finally figured out. These aren't strategy problems or communication issues, they are philosophy problems hiding in plain sight. Today I'm going to show you something that'll save you hours in your most challenging meetings. Once you see what's really happening, you'll be able to cut through the confusion instead of discussing everything to death for months. Let me show you what I discovered. Before you click away thinking philosophy is just for academics, let me ask you this. How much time did your organization waste last quarter on meetings that went nowhere? On decisions that got revisited 3 times? On strategic debates where smart people talked past each other for hours? I'm willing to bet it was weeks, maybe months of collective time. And here's what no one else seems to see. Most of that waste happened because people were having philosophical arguments without realizing it. When your team debates whether to prioritize customer satisfaction or quarterly profits, you're not having a business discussion, you're having an ethics debate that goes back to ancient Greece. When someone says we've always done it this way, and another person counters with what the data shows, you're witnessing a 400-year-old philosophical battle between tradition and empiricism. The problem isn't that these are bad arguments to have. The problem is when you don't recognize them as philosophical questions, you can't resolve them effectively. You end up arguing about tactics when you should be clarifying values. Okay, I get it. When someone says philosophy, you probably picture dusty old books and endless debates about the meaning of life. But philosophy in business, it's way more practical than you think. Whether you know it or not, every strategic decision your organization makes reflects one of 3 major ethical frameworks that philosophers have been developing for over 2,000 years. I mean, think about it. Ethics is all about figuring out the right thing to do. Isn't that exactly what strategy is? First up is consequentialism, which judges actions purely by their results. The most famous version is utilitarianism, developed by Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. The basic idea? An action is right if it produces the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Sound familiar? This is the framework behind every data-driven decision in your organization. When someone argues this will increase our customer satisfaction scores, or this initiative will drive the most revenue, they're being consequentialist. They're saying, the ends justify the means. But here's where consequentialism gets tricky in business. How do you measure the greatest good? Good for shareholders, employees, customers, society? Over what time frame? The quarterly earnings that make investors happy might lead to layoffs that devastate communities. Sam Bankman-Fried at FTX was literally a consequentialist. He followed effective altruism, earning billions to give away to charities doing the maximum good. The ends would justify any means. So when he allegedly used $8 billion of customer money, the math said it would maximize future charity. I guess we all know how that experiment turned out. The lesson? Pure consequentialism without other considerations can lead you straight off a cliff. The second framework is deontological ethics, most famously developed by Immanuel Kant. Deontology judges actions based on whether they follow moral rules or duties, regardless of consequences. Kant's categorical imperative gives us a test. Act only according to principles you could will to be universal laws. In business, this shows up every time someone says we have a responsibility to, or it's our duty to, or we always keep our commitments. When companies talk about the non-negotiable values or what we stand for, they are thinking deontologically. Johnson & Johnson's handling of the 1982 Tylenol crisis exemplified deontological thinking. When 7 people died from cyanide-laced capsules in Chicago, J&J immediately recalled 31 million bottles nationwide, even though the tampering was localized. The recall cost over $100 million. The problem was geographically contained, so consequentialists might have limited the recall to Chicago. But J&J operated from a deontological principle. Customer safety is non-negotiable, regardless of the cost. The result? After an initial plunge, they fully recovered their market share within a year because customers trusted their principles. The third framework is virtue ethics, which goes back to Aristotle. Instead of asking what should I do, virtue ethics asks what kind of person should I be. It focuses on character traits and excellences rather than specific actions or outcomes. In business, virtue ethics shows up when people talk about what kind of company do we want to be or how we do things here. When someone argues this isn't who we are, they're thinking in virtue ethics terms. But here's what makes virtue ethics tricky in organizations. Almost every company has values, those posters in the break room listing things like integrity, innovation, courage. But nobody defines what courage actually means in practice. Is it courage to take big risks or courage to say no to bad ideas? Is it courage to speak the truth to power or courage to stay the course when things get tough? And let's be honest, how often does leadership actually embody these values when the pressure's on? Companies preach innovation but punish every failed experiment, or they have transparency as a core value and hide bad news from employees for months. The values become decoration, not direction. Aristotle would say you can't just declare values, you become them through practice. You become courageous by acting courageously, honest by acting honestly. It's not about what you say you are, it's about what you repeatedly do. And unlike the other frameworks, virtue ethics is inherently about balance. Aristotle's golden mean suggests every virtue sits between two vices. Courage, between cowardice and recklessness. Confidence, between insecurity and arrogance. Let me share an example from my own experience. We had a customer who missed a contract cancellation deadline, meaning their contract would automatically renew for another year. The customer was clearly leaving, they already signed with a competitor, but legally they owed us another year of fees. Here's how the philosophical frameworks played out in our internal debate. The consequentialist argument. Let's enforce the contract, the customer is gone anyway, so let's secure the revenue. We need to hit our numbers. That's pure outcome focus. The deontological argument. We have a duty to our shareholders to maximize value. We can't let this revenue walk away. That's rules and duties. The virtue ethics argument. Is this really how we want to conduct business? We're in a small market and word spreads. What kind of company do we want to be known as? That's character and reputation. All three perspectives were valid. All three would lead to different decisions. And because nobody recognized this as a philosophical debate, we spent days if not weeks mulling over that decision. Sales was being consequentialist, I was stuck in deontological thinking, and account management was focused on virtue ethics. In the end, the character argument won. This is not who we want to be as a company. And here's what's interesting. That decision shaped who we became. Once we chose not to be the company that enforces technicalities, it made similar decisions easier. Everyone understood. This is just something we don't do. We defined our character through action, not just words on a poster. This brings us to philosophy's most famous thought experiment, and trust me, it's more relevant to your daily decisions than you might think. The trolley problem goes like this. A runaway trolley is heading towards 5 people tied to the tracks. You can pull a lever to divert it to a sidetrack where it will kill 1 person instead of 5. Do you pull that lever? Most people say yes. Save 5 lives by sacrificing 1, the math seems obvious. But then philosophers add a twist. What if instead of pulling a lever you had to push someone off a bridge to stop the trolley? Same numbers, same outcome, but now most people say no. Why? Both scenarios involve actively causing 1 death to prevent 5. But something feels fundamentally different about pushing someone versus pulling a lever. This distinction between direct and indirect action shows up in every major business decision you make. Your startup has spent 2 years building a product based on extensive user research. You have 6 months of runway left. Recent data shows your core assumption was wrong. But you also discovered your technology could solve a completely different problem in a market you know nothing about. Continuing down the current track might kill the company, harming investors, employees, and customers who depend on you. But pivoting means actively abandoning commitments you've made. This is your trolley problem. Now let's add complexity. The original product was the founder's personal vision and got everyone excited to join the company. Early employees took pay cuts to work on something meaningful. Your company culture is built around this specific vision. Pivoting doesn't just mean changing direction, it means admitting the founder was wrong, potentially demoralizing people who believed in the vision and fundamentally altering the company's identity. This maps to what philosophers call the doctrine of doing versus allowing. There is a moral difference between letting something bad happen and actively causing something bad to happen. Letting the company fail by sticking with the plan feels passive. Actively killing the founder's vision feels like betrayal. Here's the business equivalent of pushing someone off the bridge. Your company is bleeding cash. You can save it by automating a process, which means personally firing 20 people you hired. People who trusted you, people with families. The alternative is letting your company slowly die through natural attrition. No layoffs, just hiring freezes and people eventually leaving. Both paths lead to job losses, but one requires you to look people in the eye and personally destroy their livelihood. The other lets market forces do the dirty work while you stay morally clean. Reed Hastings faced this at Netflix when they split streaming and DVD services. He knew it would anger customers and hurt short-term growth, but protecting customer feelings in the short term would kill the company in the long term. He took the direct action path, personally owning an unpopular but necessary decision. Compare this to Yahoo's approach during their decline. They avoided making hard choices about their identity, instead letting market forces slowly marginalize different business units. It felt more humane, but ultimately cost more jobs and destroyed more value. The lesson? Sometimes the kindest cut is the quick one, but that doesn't make it any easier. Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's say you pivot, but 6 months later you discover your original product would have worked perfectly. You just needed 3 more months of development. You learned this only because a competitor launched the exact same product and succeeded wildly. Were you wrong to pivot? This is what philosophers call moral luck. Situations where the rightness or wrongness of your decision depends on factors you couldn't control or predict. Steve Jobs was right to bet everything on the iPhone, but he couldn't have known that mobile internet infrastructure would develop fast enough to make it viable. If 3G networks would have been delayed by 2 years, the iPhone might have flopped and we'd call his decision reckless. The key insight? You can't judge decisions purely by outcomes. You have to evaluate the reasoning process and the information available at the time. This protects you from excessive confidence when things go well and paralyzed second guessing when they don't. Speaking of information and reasoning, we've all agreed that evidence over authority is how modern organizations should work. No more because I said so, no more highest paid person's opinion, just pure objective data making our decisions. So why do we still have the same circular arguments? Why does every team interpret the same dashboard differently? And why do data-driven companies keep making spectacularly bad decisions? Because we're missing something huge. Something philosophers have known for centuries. Data doesn't speak for itself. It never has. And until you understand why, you keep drowning in metrics while missing what actually matters. I keep coming back to Nokia because they are the perfect ghost story for modern business. I've talked about them before, how their middle managers were too scared to deliver bad news, how they had all the right data but couldn't act on it. But here's another layer to the story that connects directly to the philosophy problem. Nokia had all the data. Market research showing smartphones were the future, user feedback about their clunky software, competitive analysis of the iPhone, internal reports from engineers saying they were behind. The data was screaming change direction now. Yet, Nokia's market share dropped from 50% to basically zero in 5 years. But here's the part I haven't talked about before. It wasn't just fear that killed them. Fear created a deadly feedback loop. Middle managers, afraid of delivering bad news, massaged the data to look less dire. Not lying exactly, but emphasizing positives, burying problems in footnotes, choosing metrics that looked better. Meanwhile, executives didn't want to see the truth either. They'd built their identity on, we're Nokia, we know phones. So when the data looked suspiciously rosy, they didn't dig deeper. When warning signs appeared, they found explanations that protected their worldview. Both sides were editing reality. One through fear, one through ego. Data existed, evidence was clear, but between managers who wouldn't fully share it and executives who wouldn't fully see it, the truth got lost. This is what philosophers call the theory-ladenness of observation. Every observation is shaped by the theories and frameworks you bring to it. Here's what philosophers figured out. You never just see data. You see data through frameworks, assumptions, beliefs. It's like your brain has Instagram filters and you can't turn them off. Classic experiment. Show people an ambiguous image. Tell half it's a rabbit, tell half it's a duck. Guess what they see? Their expectation shapes their perception. Now, scale it up to your quarterly business review. Same dashboard, but sales sees proof that marketing isn't generating enough leads. Marketing sees proof that sales isn't following up properly. Product sees proof that features matter more than either. Finance sees proof that everyone is spending too much. Same data, 4 different movies playing in 4 different heads. This isn't stupidity or politics. This is how human cognition works. And until you account for it, evidence-based decision-making is just authority wearing a lab coat. Whenever smart companies make dumb data-driven decisions, some patterns keep showing up. Let's start with the streetlight effect. You know the old joke about the drunk looking for his keys under the streetlight? Not because he dropped them there, but because this is where the light is? That's most organizations with data. We measure what's easy to measure, then pretend that's what matters. Response time? Easy. Customer satisfaction? Hard. Guess which one becomes a KPI? Deutsche Bahn, Germany's national railway, became notorious for this. They tracked on-time performance as their primary measure of service quality, but here's the kicker. Cancelled trains didn't count as late. The result? Trains would turn around mid-journey to get back on schedule, stranding passengers who needed to reach their actual destination. They'd cancel problematic segments to keep their metrics clean. The Germans even had a word for it, named after the transportation minister back then. Steuerwende. Literally a train doing a U-turn to save its statistics. Imagine being a passenger. Your train just gives up halfway to your destination and heads back. But hey, Deutsche Bahn's punctuality statistics look better now. They optimized to what they could easily measure, on-time arrivals instead of what actually mattered, getting people where they need to go. The lesson? Just because something is easy to measure doesn't mean it's the right thing to measure. Next, survivorship bias. We only analyze what's still around, forgetting about everything else that disappeared. Classic example from World War II. US Navy engineers examined planes returning from combat, noting where they had bullet holes, mostly in the wings and tail. They wanted to reinforce those areas. But a statistician named Abram Wald from the Statistical Research Group at Columbia pointed out the obvious. These planes survived. The planes that didn't return were probably hit in the other areas, the engine and cockpit. They were studying the wrong dataset entirely. Same thing happens in business. We study successful companies for lessons while ignoring the thousands that tried the exact same strategies and failed. That's why every business book about what makes companies great look foolish in 10 years when half those companies have collapsed. And look, I get the irony. I'm here giving you business advice that might look ridiculous in a decade. The difference? I'm not claiming to have found the secret to success. I'm pointing out thinking tools and patterns. Logic doesn't go out of style. Fallacies are still fallacies in 10 years. The ability to think clearly, that's timeless. The lesson? Always ask yourself, what am I not seeing because it's no longer here to see? And finally, the McNamara fallacy. Named after Robert McNamara, the US Defense Secretary during the Vietnam War, who believed that if you couldn't measure it, it didn't matter. He tracked enemy body counts obsessively, turning the war into a spreadsheet. The metrics showed victory, reality showed defeat. Hearts and minds, morale, political will, all the unmeasurable stuff that actually determined the outcome was ignored. Microsoft under Steve Ballmer fell into this exact trap with their stack ranking system. Every employee got a numerical rating, teams were forced into bell curves, everything was quantified. The result? Internal competition destroyed collaboration, political gaming replaced innovation. The unmeasurable stuff, trust, creativity, teamwork, evaporated. They lost a decade because they tried to manage only what they could measure. The lesson? The most important things in your organization, trust, creativity, morale, might be exactly the things you can't put in a spreadsheet. Here's where it gets really insidious. Remember evidence over authority? Well, authority found a workaround. It dresses up as evidence. The executive who cherry-picks data to support the pet project, authority in disguise. The analysis that starts with the conclusion and works backward, authority with math. The dashboard that only shows metrics that make leadership look good, authority with pretty colors. You know those charts every tech company shows at product launches? The ones where performance always goes up and to the right, but somehow the y-axis never has labels, or it says performance without defining what that means. Apple's chip benchmarks, startup pitch decks, quarterly business review, same trick everywhere. The chart looks impressive, the trend is undeniable, the conclusion seems obvious. Just don't ask what the units are. What are we actually measuring? Against what baseline? Cherry-picked benchmarks, convenient timeframes? That's not evidence over authority, that's authority with a graphics department. But here's the thing. This isn't always malicious. Sometimes it's just human. We all do this. We all see what we expect to see, find what we are looking for, interpret ambiguous signals as confirmation. The question is, what do we do about it? So how do you actually work through these challenges? Here's a practical framework that incorporates everything we've covered. For ethical dilemmas. Step number 1. Identify the philosophical framework in play. When you're stuck, ask, are we thinking like consequentialists, focusing on outcomes? Or deontologists, focusing on duties and principles? Or virtue ethicists, focusing on character and identity? Don't judge which is right, just recognize which frameworks people are using. I promise you, half your strategic disagreements are actually different ethical frameworks talking past each other. Step number 2. Separate direct and indirect consequences. Is this a pull the lever decision or a push a person decision? Are you allowing something to happen or actively causing it? Both might be necessary, but they require different levels of moral responsibility and different communication strategies. Your team can handle direct action if they understand why it's necessary. What they can't handle is pretending indirect consequences aren't your responsibility. Step number 3. Consider your time horizon. Are you optimizing for immediate relief or long-term sustainability? Many trolley problems in business come from mismatched time horizons. The decision that feels right this quarter might be wrong for the next decade. Step number 4. Think meta level. What kind of organization are you becoming through this decision? What precedent are you setting? How will this shape the future choices in culture? Every decision doesn't just solve a problem, it teaches your organization how to think about problems. For evidence and authority. Make hypotheses explicit. Before you run an initiative, challenge yourself. What do we expect to happen and why? What would prove us wrong? This is what we should do religiously. Write it down. We expect 1,000 signups in month 1 because our service showed strong interest. Then, when you get 0 signups, you can't pretend the data was ambiguous. I'm struggling with this right now with this channel. I catch myself putting a positive spin on every data point. Sure, engagement isn't all that great, but subscriber growth looks really good. That's how powerful our bias is. Even when we know about it, even when we're teaching about it, we still fall for it. Which is exactly why writing down hypotheses before you see data is so important. It's the only defense against our own brains. Diversify your interpreters. Same data, different eyes. Your biggest insights come from people who see differently. Get the introvert's take on your successful all-hands meeting. Ask engineering to interpret your customer feedback. Have customer success analyze your product metrics. Fresh perspectives reveal blind spots that expertise can create. Separate data collection from decision rights. The person who benefits from good numbers shouldn't be the one measuring them. Sounds obvious? Look at your organization. I bet half your metrics are self-reported by the teams being measured. Embrace disconfirming evidence. Create a culture where finding problems is celebrated, not just lip service, actual rewards. Some companies run fuck-up nights. Regular sessions that people share their mistakes and what they learned. No blame, just learning. The biggest screw-up gets applause, not punishment. Guess what? Problems begin to surface faster. Because people aren't afraid to see them, they're actually racing to claim credit for catching them first. Philosophers have a beautiful concept, epistemic humility. Basically, it means knowing the limits of what you know. It's the difference between the data says X, arrogant, and our interpretation of this limited data suggests X might be happening, humble. I know, epistemic humility isn't going on any motivational posters anytime soon, but it might save your company. This doesn't mean being wishy-washy about everything, it means being precise about what you know, how you know it, and what you don't know yet. It means having the confidence to say, I don't know, and the wisdom to change your mind when evidence changes. Let me show you what this looks like when organizations actually figure it out. Amazon's written narratives. Instead of PowerPoint presentations, Amazon requires 6-page written memos for major decisions. Why? Writing forces clarity of thought. You can't hide fuzzy thinking behind fancy slides. The meetings start with everyone silently reading the memo, then discussion. This prevents the highest paid person from framing the conversation before others have formed their own opinions. It's brilliant, and it works because it acknowledges how human cognition actually functions. Bridgewater's radical transparency. Ray Dalio built a culture where any employee can challenge any decision, even his own. They record meetings, they rate each other's reasoning, and make everything searchable. It sounds intense, and it is. But it creates an environment where evidence genuinely trumps authority because authority is constantly being tested. The best idea really does win, regardless of who suggests it. Microsoft's transformation under Satya Nadella. Instead of Ballmer's stack ranking, Nadella introduced the growth mindset culture. He literally changed the review system from know-it-all to learn-it-all. Employees started sharing failures openly because learning was valued over being right. Stock price tripled in 5 years. So what do you actually do with all this? You're not going to transform your organization overnight, but you can start making things better immediately. Here's your practical toolkit. The framework translator. Next time you're stuck in a circular argument, try this. It sounds like Sarah is focused on our duty to customers, while Mike is focused on revenue outcomes. Can we find an approach that honors both? You don't need to use philosophical jargon. Just help people see they're applying different frameworks to the same problem. Watch how quickly the conversation shifts from conflict to collaboration. The assumption audit. For your next major decision, spend just 15 minutes listing what you're assuming about customers, competitors, capabilities, and conditions. Then ask, which assumptions are most critical, most uncertain? How could we test them quickly and cheaply? This one exercise will save you from more bad decisions than you can count, and it only takes 15 minutes. The peer review revolution. Here's what more companies should try. And stick with me here, because I'm stealing this from scientists. You know how researchers avoid bias? Peer review. They have other scientists who have no stakes in the outcome scrutinize their work. Some even publish their hypotheses before running studies to prevent cherry-picking results later. Imagine applying this to business. Having departments review each other's quarterly results, marketing's metrics reviewed by operations, sales forecasts challenged by customer success, strategic initiatives evaluated by people who have no stakes in their success. Think about what would happen. Marketing might admit their leads aren't as qualified as claimed. Sales might acknowledge they're pushing deals that will churn. Product might realize their must-have features are nice-to-haves. Painful? Yes, but you catch problems 6 months earlier. That's millions in safe mistakes. And here's the thing. Science has been doing this for centuries because it works. Why don't we? Building long-term capability. Start with language. When someone uses a key term like quality or urgent or strategic, ask, when you say that, what specifically do you mean? This seems trivial, but it prevents enormous amounts of downstream confusion and conflict. Half your meetings are long because people are using the same words to mean different things. Model intellectual humility. Admit when you don't know something. Change your mind when presented with better evidence. Ask for criticism of your ideas. This gives others permission to think openly rather than defensively. And here's the secret. Admitting you don't know everything makes people trust you more, not less. Create safe spaces for philosophical discussion. Start a monthly decision autopsy where you examine past decisions. What thinking processes led to good or bad outcomes? Frame this as skill building, not critique. The goal is to get better at thinking together, not to assign blame for past mistakes. For every important decision, ask these 3 questions. Number 1. What philosophical framework are we using? Are we being consequentialist, deontological, virtue ethics focused? Number 2. What assumptions are we making? About markets, capabilities, resources, time? Number 3. How might we be misinterpreting the evidence? Selection bias, survivorship bias, confirmation bias? Just asking these questions will change the quality of your decisions, I guarantee it. Here's my prediction. Organizations that learn to recognize these philosophical dynamics will make better decisions faster. They won't get paralyzed by complexity because they'll have frameworks for working through it. We're not there yet, but research already shows the potential. Stanford studies found that bias awareness training improved decision accuracy by nearly 30%, while teams using critical thinking frameworks can improve problem-solving efficiency by up to 40%. Why? They spend less time on irrelevant factors and more time on key assumptions and logical structure. And here's what excites me the most. This capability is incredibly hard to copy. You can steal someone's business model, poach their talent, copy their features, but you can't replicate the capacity for clear thinking and good judgment. In a world where information is abundant but wisdom is scarce, the organizations that learn to think clearly won't just solve problems faster, they'll be solving the right problems. While competitors are stuck in meeting hell arguing about symptoms, these organizations will already be 2 steps ahead. Look, you're going to keep facing impossible decisions and circular arguments. That's not optional. It comes with the territory of building something meaningful. But now you have a choice. You can keep having the same philosophical arguments without recognizing them, wasting time and energy on symptoms. Or you can develop the ability to see these hidden dynamics and address them directly. You can keep pretending that data speaks for itself, that evidence automatically trumps authority, that smart people will naturally reach good conclusions. Or you can accept that human cognition is complex and build systems that account for it. The tools have been available for over 2,500 years. Philosophers have been developing frameworks for clear thinking, ethical reasoning, and evidence evaluation. They work, they are practical, and they're waiting for you to use them. Because here's the thing. Once you see these patterns, you can't unsee them. And once you learn to work with them instead of against them, your perspective shifts permanently. Meetings become productive, decisions become clearer, your organization becomes smarter. You're already here, which means you're ready for something better. You're ready to stop talking in circles and start making progress. You're ready to build an organization that thinks clearly, decides wisely, and actually gets smarter over time. If this resonated with you, share it with that one person in your organization who gets it. You know, the one who's frustrated with never-ending meetings, just as you are. Hit subscribe if you want to keep exploring how to make work actually work, because this is just the beginning of what's possible when you think clearly together. What's your worst meeting story? Drop it in the comments. In the next video, we are taking this even deeper. If hidden philosophy shapes every argument, what happens when we make it explicit in our strategy? I'll show you why strategy isn't really about competitive analysis and market positioning, it's applied philosophy. And more importantly, how to build philosophical literacy, the ability to think clearly as an organization. This is the Liberty Framework. Let's turn philosophical problems into competitive advantages. See you next time.